Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022, the collapse of the Russian economy has been a hot topic in the media. Over the past 3 years, you've likely seen countless news and videos predicting Russia's imminent economic downfall. But it didn't happen. Despite sweeping sanctions from the West, Russia's economy showed surprising resilience, with steady growth. Just when many had dismissed the collapse narrative as little more than wishful thinking, the rumor is back, louder than ever. So, what's changed? Is this another round of exaggerated forecasts, or is Russia's economy truly in trouble this time? Let's cut through the noise and uncover the truth behind the latest wave of headlines. In early 2022, the West responded to Russia's invasion of Ukraine with a wave of unprecedented sanctions. The goal? To isolate Moscow economically and bring its financial system to its knees. Billions of dollars in Russian foreign reserves were frozen in Western banks, plummeting the ruble and causing panic. For a moment, the collapse looked imminent. But weeks passed, then months. And suddenly, the ruble came roaring back. Despite the initial shock in 2022, Russia's economy didn't crumble, it rebounded. In 2023, the economy grew by 3.6%, and in 2024, it surged again, by more than 4%. The collapse that was widely predicted never arrived. So, what happened? Was it resilience, manipulation, or was it something else? The answer lies not in immunity, but in adaptation. The Russian government and central bank acted fast. In the first weeks after the invasion, they locked down the currency markets. Russians were banned from sending foreign currency abroad. Exporters were required to sell their earnings and convert them into rubles. Imports were slashed to preserve foreign reserves. At the same time, the central bank hiked interest rates to 20%, pulling the ruble out of freefall almost overnight. The result? A stabilized currency and a sense of regained control. Then came the energy exports, Russia's economic lifeline. With Europe cutting off Russian oil and gas, Russia turned towards East. India and China became top buyers of discounted Russian crude. In fact, India emerged as a central player, refining Russian oil and quietly exporting it to Western markets as diesel, jet fuel, and gasoline. In other words, the oil was still flowing, just with more stops along the way. Russia also built up a shadow fleet of old tankers, uninsured, reflagged, and often sailing under the radar, to evade shipping restrictions and sanctions enforcement. Next came import substitution. With Western goods vanishing from shelves, the government launched a push to make more things at home, from tractors to toothpaste. Factories pivoted. State subsidies increased. In some sectors, production returned to levels not seen since the Soviet era. At the same time, Chinese imports such as electronics, machinery, cars, even luxury goods, filled the gap left by Europe. And to keep demand steady, Russia legalized what's known as parallel imports, bringing in Western goods without the brand's permission. On the financial front, after being cut out of the SWIFT banking system, Russia expanded its own SBFs, a domestic version of SWIFT. Visa and MasterCard also pulled out, but Russia's Mir card system kept domestic payments running. And for international trade, Moscow shifted away from the dollar, using rubles, yuan, and Indian rupees instead. While capital controls, oil exports and imports got the headlines, something else quietly played one of the most crucial roles in Russia's economic resilience. The National Wealth Fund, a sovereign reserve built from years of oil and gas surpluses. Before the war, the fund had grown to over $175 billion, giving the Russian government a powerful financial cushion. When sanctions hit and capital flight began, this reserve gave Moscow the resources to act decisively. The fund was used to stabilize the ruble, support key industries, and fill budget shortfalls, all while maintaining spending on infrastructure and social programs. It gave Russia something most economies under siege don't have: the room to maneuver. It absorbed shocks and gave policymakers the breathing space to adjust, without immediately resorting to drastic cuts or uncontrolled inflation. Another big transformation came from war itself. Russia transitioned into a wartime economy. Military spending surged. defense factories went into overdrive, producing everything from ammunition to armored vehicles. This demand fed industrial output, kept unemployment at record lows, and powered regional economies. Geopolitically, Russia turned away from the West and toward the global South, finding new channels for their exports, opening up new financial channels, some in rubles, some in yuan, bypassing Western financial architecture entirely. While the capital controls and national wealth funds strengthened their currency and financed the military spending. For Russia, it did soften the blow. But the question is, whether this is sustainable. In reality, the war spending has masked a deeper issue. Well, the GDP is growing, but it's fueled significantly by defense contracts, not citizens' industries. Hospitals, schools, construction and consumer industries are either stagnating or shrinking. Take manufacturing. In June 2025, Russia's manufacturing PMI fell to 47.5, the worst contraction since early 2022. This means falling new orders, shrinking output, and businesses laying off workers. Russia's official unemployment rate is low, but that's misleading. Much of the labor force is now in military uniform. Civilian sectors are shedding jobs unseen in consumer data. Their labor pool is shrinking, due to nearly 1 million war casualties, conscription, and mounting immigration. Young, skilled professionals are leaving in droves, taking knowledge, innovation, and future economic potential with them. In the markets, prices are surging. With inflation near 10%, central bankers face a brutal choice: choke growth or throttle inflation. The parallel imports and domestic substitution also come with lower quality goods, but with higher prices. Oil and gas revenues have also dropped about 14% in June compared to last year. Meanwhile, military expenditures have surged and now exceed 130% of these revenues, creating a dangerous fiscal imbalance. The shadow tankers helped Russia to sneakily export oil, but at a steep cost. These older, uninspected vessels are inefficient, risky, and now under tighter EU sanctions. And the West isn't stopping. EU's latest sanctions target the shadow fleet, lower oil price caps to around $45 a barrel, bar insurance, and tighten enforcement. To make matters worse, the National Wealth Fund, the cushion that helped Russia adapt, is now wearing thin. By mid-2025, liquid assets in the fund, the part Russia can actually spend, have dropped to under $50 billion. Some of what remains is locked into long-term infrastructure projects or held in foreign assets that are now frozen by sanctions. In reality, Russia has already spent more than 2/3 of its once massive reserve. And with oil revenues shrinking, inflation rising, and a widening budget deficit, the government's ability to dip into reserves is no longer what it used to be. And the cuts have begun. Civilian budgets, healthcare, infrastructure, and education are being frozen or quietly downsized. Even military programs are under pressure to prioritize strategic efficiency, the code word for doing more with less. The National Wealth Fund gave Russia time, but time, as it turns out, is running out. Despite strong growth figures in 2023 and early 2024, the momentum is fading fast. The IMF now projects Russia's GDP will grow just 1.4% in 2025, a sharp slowdown. Even Kremlin officials admit the risk of recession is real. In fact, one of President Putin's own economic ministers recently warned the country is on the edge of recession. The manufacturing sector is shrinking. Inflation is climbing back toward double digits. And the labor force has been drained by war, immigration, and demographic decline, is struggling to support the economy. War spending has outpaced oil revenue, and the National Wealth Fund is nearly exhausted and cannot compensate for the excess spending. The new sanctions are squeezing the very loopholes that kept the machine running. So suddenly, the cracks are getting harder to ignore. Does this mean Russia is about to collapse within a year or so, as the media emphasize? No, that's unlikely. There will be no dramatic freefall, no lights-out moment. Instead, what lies ahead is something slower, but possibly more dangerous: a prolonged, grinding decline. Why? Because Russia still has tools, oil exports, state control, currency levers. But these tools come with costs and diminishing returns. Sectors stagnate. Budgets shrink. Innovation fades. People quietly leave. And over time, the country wakes up to find itself weaker, older, and poorer than before. That's the real risk for Russia, not a sudden crash, but a slow-motion retreat from economic relevance. The days of Russian resilience aren't over yet, but they're numbered. And the difficult years are just beginning. If you found this breakdown useful, consider subscribing for more fact-based global analysis. See you next time.